It really is a pleasure to be here with all of you this morning. Thank you for having me. And as I've been listening to the conversation and the questions going back and forth, it's, what really strikes me is how multidimensional this conversation is. And Karen had that slide with the iceberg, and we've seen pictures of icebergs, but what we don't think about is that that's a three-dimensional object and how much depth is in the iceberg, as well as how big it is and how much there is. And so, today we're just barely able to touch upon things, but I really am excited to share with you how leadership plays into this, and especially those of us who come from a nursing background. How that actually makes us very unique and what we can really bring to this conversation. So I'm sharing my screen. Let me get into a good mode here. There we go. And so as I was preparing for this talk, I recall a conversation that I had several years ago with when I was a young VP and just at the beginning of a Fortune 500 company. And the senior regional vice president was about to retire, and I didn't want to let all this amazing knowledge go. And so I asked for a meeting because I really admired her. At this point, the company had grown to, it was a healthcare company. So we had 2.1 million members at that point. We were in 8 states. And so I was a vice president of the corporate office, and later over over the clinical services in one of those states. But I had really seen that this particular leader was very different from all the rest, and very well loved, very popular, but everything that she did was different. And so I started asking her questions. And as I listened to her story, what I really began to see was her authenticity and her determination to bring who she was into every conversation that she had and into the way that she led. And she had learned that balance that we're all looking for, how she led from her own heart. So we're going to be talking about leadership, and we're also going to be talking about a lot of the things that we weren't taught in nursing school. I'm a nurse by background, a nurse practitioner, board certified in family practice, as well as psychiatric mental health. And that journey, all those initials behind my name, really was about being able to get to my heart and to be able to lead in a way that was authentic to me, that still helped meet the goals of the company. And it took a lot of thinking and doing and learning to get to that. So I'm hoping to share with you some of those lessons that, soft skills are necessarily, they are often ignored, and it's something that's just really very critical. So let's talk about what leadership means. What does it mean to you? The official definitions of it, right, is using your individual traits and abilities to be in relationship with others, to interpret the environment and the context of a situation that's emerging. And sometimes it's emerging very rapidly, and enter that situation in the absence of a script or a defined plan. So it's really being able to be there in the moment and assess that situation and be able to take your team in a direction. So we've had a lot of this the last 16, 18 months. And so we have really needed to be fast on our feet and to improvise and help others cope and thrive and function at a high capacity based on the situation that we've all been placed in. And so key traits of leadership are being able to articulate a vision, especially and remind people of that vision when you are faced in a situation that is overwhelming, such as the COVID pandemic that we've been dealing with, such as the hacking of the HSE system. I mean, it's just challenged us in every way possible. Being able to see possibilities in the middle of all that, though, that's what sets a leader apart from everybody else and just really brings you up. Being able to communicate a plan, being able to communicate confidence and safety when people are really looking to leadership for that. And then that being able to adapt quickly, and it just being, just watching actually how everyone went from being computer systems and how you all had to go back to paper in 24 hours or less, you know, and we switched back to these systems that we thought we had put away forever. And not only did we need to bring them back, we had to make them efficient, and we had to make them work in the context of today's work, in the context of what we have to do to take care of our patients. And so using that experience and that knowledge was really important. Now let's contrast that a little bit with what it is, what the key traits of management are and what you need to be able to do. So in the management role, you're still planning and you're directing and evaluating. The situation is different in that the outcomes that you are looking for are either known or they've already been established. So whereas a leader is dealing with the unknown, management is dealing with something that's a little bit more known, where you know how you want your team to react, where you have the opportunity to really have that feedback and communication and that conversation to improve those clinical processes and those outcomes. And the relationship is really based in sustaining it, in really having that consistency of the purpose and what you're trying to achieve, and how to really bring your team into that. And so the management key traits are slightly different because you're identifying those problems that are existing within the system today, within the situation that's now. It can still be fluid, but at the same time, you're able to maintain consistent behavior and consistent expectations in that, and encourage your team to still rise up and hold that quality and that standard in the face of the daily things, in the face of things that might be repetitive, even when it's unsure. And so we talk about leadership and management a lot. What we don't tend to talk about is the third piece, which is the actual team. Okay, and sometimes we, another term that's in the literature that I really like that this senior VP used with me as well is followership, right? And so followership gives us a different, it gives you a sense of the body of people that we're working with, where each member of the team needs to be at their highest level of practice, at their best, at their optimal level. And at the same time, they are able to acquiesce to a peer leader, whoever is leading or managing that team, so that they're all acting together and acting with purpose. That same team member needs to also have the skills and the competency and the leadership training to be able to step into that leading role, right? We see this with staff nurses who then might be charge nurse for a shift, where you have these leaders that they're moving in and out of that position, where they're still able to speak and act with authority and integrity and principle, but still bringing the decision making and adding in the value of that the organization is trying to bring to those patients. So if you roll all these traits together, you end up with attributes that you find common in all of us in healthcare. And it's because we have all worked in these roles in one way or another most of the time. And even if you have someone who is a healthcare assistant, they still need to have some of these attributes, because they are still taking care of patients. And so as a workforce, it is important to be able to focus energy and stamina, to use critical thinking in decision making, and nurses and healthcare workers are famous for intuition and saving lives with that intuition. So being able to recognize it, but also back it up with facts and be able to pull the science in together with what we are doing when we're acting from our heart and when we're acting with intuition, and being responsible for that. We have a special gift. This is our spidey sense, we call it here, of being able to perceive what the needs of others are, to communicate with them, to help them reach goals that people themselves are not sure that they can reach. and to be able to maintain and keep the standards that we're setting. And that's what leads to our ideal team. So we want teams that can accomplish the objectives, teams that are trustworthy, teams that can motivate each other as well as our patients that we are caring for, and teams that are flexible, that can change rapidly during crises or times of change and still maintain their competence. And so this is the workforce that we dream of, right? This is the workforce that we all want to have. Unfortunately, right now, this is the workforce that we have a lot of the time. Those ideal teams are there, but they're struggling. And as the pandemic has continued over the past year and a half, it's become much worse. And compassion fatigue and burnout were issues before the pandemic started. And now the statistics are beyond alarming. The World Health Organization put caregiver burnout at about 65% of our workforce. The INMO put it at 82%. So in Ireland, this, and it might be because of the size, it might be because of just different ways in the structure, or just what you're having to deal with there is at such a level that 82% of the workforce is feeling that their work in mental health service is negatively impacting their mental health. So is that going to get us the quality care we want? Is this what we want to be contributing to? Is this what we want to be leading? So unless we see how important it is to take care of this workforce, there is a potential here for massive retention problems unless we acknowledge what our workforce is going through and take steps to correct that. We're talking about energy balance, right? So if the workforce is working and putting all their energy out, and anybody that has been, we've listened to some of the stories that Karen was telling, our people put their hearts and their lives into their work, and they pour it out every time they come to work with these patients. And if you're pouring everything out and not putting it back in, you're depleting energy. And depleted energy has a physical effect on the body. I don't have time to get into it today, and hopefully we'll be able to do it in the future, of really tracking and tracing how that energy in the body flows and understanding the direct connection between energy balance and things like burnout and errors in medications, health challenges that people are facing, and the effect on performance. There is a very real connection, and it's easy to trace. And so I'd like to talk to you a little bit about stress and resilience and that performance curve, because we have, there are plenty of people that say, okay, I'm used to being stressed, I do better under stress, and people truly believe that. And so I want to talk about this in the context of challenge. We're going to call it challenges, okay? Because not everybody feels like it's stress. They like that challenge. It gets their adrenaline pumping, and they feel like they do better in that way. So when someone is faced with a challenge over time, okay, whether it's a 12-hour shift or working in a unit, over a period of months, initially, the adrenaline does give us that energy. They're embracing that challenge. Adrenaline is related to cortisol, which is our fight or flight, okay, but it's that fight. You've got the fight, and so this is where you have more. You're more energy, your heart is moving faster, you're breathing a little bit more, everyone is kind of really rising to the occasion with that. As the stressor or the challenge continues over time, now you're reaching, they get into a period of maximum efficiency. Okay, this is now where your team can perform for days or maybe weeks, and everybody is feeding each other, and the free lunches are being brought in to the staff. There's lots of recognition. You go home and acknowledgement and what a great job. And this is, you kind of feel that life force of, this is what I was born to do, to take care of people. And I really see that I'm really doing this and doing a good job. As time continues though, what happens is that fight or flight starts to take you into a hyperreactive stage. The question about the PTSD, this is where it comes from, right? So someone is able to perform at a high level. They continue to perform at a high level, but the energy level and the ability to continue at that high level begins to diminish. And as that begins to diminish, our the body's protective mechanisms start to kick in. And that's where the hyperreactivity starts to come in. And that's the precursor to PTSD. And one of the first symptoms of that is difficulty in sleeping. And so now you think about, you have these workers, and some of them are shift workers, and they're maintaining this high level of performance. And now they're maybe doing it on a night shift, or they're working 5 12-hour shifts in a row. And it's going to have an effect. It has a physical effect on the body, which means that you also have a psychological effect and a mental effect. And now people are making mistakes, and now they are starting to exhibit the emotional exhaustion and the burnout. And these are where the breakdowns occur. So what we're looking at here in this performance curve, this one is actually a 60-day curve. And this was a classic study done with the US military with thousands of people. This is not a unique situation. It was very well studied, and we are able to see how performance levels change over time. And this is actually what led to the practice of rotating servicemen in and out of the theater or being in combat situations. So what we would really like to see though is a higher level of is being able to maintain that performance for a longer period of time without having those psychological effects. And you can actually do that when you have resilience training. So these servicemen were then put through resilience and self-care training. And those practices were, and they still are, being used in all the levels of the military, including the most elite levels of the military. And this is how they help maintain their workforce and be able to maintain that level of performance over a higher period of time. It's also being used in healthcare with nurses, emergency responders, police, and fire. So this is very well studied. There's a lot of literature now that spans over 20 years that will bear these out. So people tend to think of resilience as the ability to bounce back after a challenge, right? And so there's more to it. We work with an expanded definition of this, and resilience is having the capacity to prepare for, to recover from, and adapt in the face of a stress, a challenge, or an adversity. Now think back to our leadership characteristics for a moment that we were talking about. This is what we're looking at, the ability to be able to react quickly in situations where there is unknown, the ability to maintain performance and help a team maintain the skills and the coping and whatever they need in order to continue in the face of adversity. Resilience is a concept that is starting to be talked about a little bit more, thank goodness. But it's something that is critical to not only your team, but to your organization. Because as leaders, right, as nurses, we come in and we learn to work with people. Or we come into healthcare because we want to help people. We're working at an individual level. As leaders now, you're taking those same skills, and what you need to do is implement that at a systemic level. So when I first moved into management, I was so excited because I love taking care of people. And now, pardon me, I was going to get to take care of a lot of people at the same time. So let's take a look at this graph, and let me get a sip of water. So most of us in this workforce that is have heavily stressed, slightly burned out, fatigued, and struggling. We're hearing these stories, right? They're struggling from a mental and emotional level as well as a physical level. And these are the things we hear. They're tired, they're exhausted, a high level of depression, anxiety, which is a precursor again to that PTSD state. Sometimes they're just irritable, and sometimes they're angry. And as Paul also pointed out, these are the people that are staying in our organizations. They don't quit and leave. Sometimes they do, but a good number of them actually, the last study that I read, about 40% of people who felt this way had no plans to leave their organization. So they're staying and they become your organization. If you're able to get them into and teach them skills to build resiliency, look at the results that we have. Now, this is not a small study, okay? This is data of almost 12,000 people. And it's actually a few years old, so this is actually pre-COVID, and you can just imagine now extrapolating what this would look like now. But with this training, you have feelings of fatigue drop from 45 to 26%, the exhaustion dropping from 31 to 16%. This is dropping by half, right? Levels of depression also dropping by half, anxiety dropping by just about half, feelings of being annoyed and angry. You can really see a change that happens before and after. And it's not just the workers. Look at this study of executives, okay? Chief nurse executives, the highest leadership, going through similar training. The same kinds of results. We're seeing the fatigue, 50% drop. How would you feel if you had 50% more energy? I would love it. I'll take it. How would you feel if 42% of you were feeling exhausted and now that goes down to 8%? Look at the change in the anxiety, in the feelings of being cynical from 25% to 0, feeling resentful 25% to 0, depression 8% to 0. This is real. Now look at how you would be able to function if you were experiencing some of these, or if your colleagues were experiencing some of these, or the people that work for you were having some of these feelings, and the change that you can make in 2 to 4 weeks. So in a month's time. And this is what we see. This is, as Karen and I just completed a cohort that went through this training. And I heard things like life-changing. Like, I don't know how I got through my day before I learned how to do this. And so it's so important to have not only the training, but the continued support in learning the skills until they are grounded and really set in your brain. Now look at this from the other side of the scale. It's nice to look at the positive things and not just always the negative ones. And so if you're a chief nurse executive in your leadership job, how would you like to go from feeling peaceful a little bit of the time to peaceful more than half of the time in your job, in your daily work, where your feelings of calm go from 45% to 92%? How would you like to feel calm all the time? How would you like to feel thankful all the time or motivated all the time? Because you're replacing your inner battery, you're building up your inner capacity to prepare for and adapt to change and be able to manage it in the moment. Now, how long does it last, right? This isn't something that's just quick, or is it? So we have data that shows, now these are 5 global corporations, different set of people, okay? But there's 1,400 of them, still an excellent study and an excellent data sample. And they go through this training, and after 6 weeks, you still see these changes, right? A lot of them dropping by 50% or more. After 6 months, the changes have still stayed. So this is a sustainable intervention. Once you train your workforce, you're able to keep them at this level. And so keeping your workforce, one thing, because everybody that receives this training wants to stay. They don't want to leave this situation. I worked for a hospital years ago, And there was another very, actually a bigger hospital less than 2 miles down the street. You're dealing in kilometers. I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to do that fast in my head. Just down the street, there's another hospital. And it was well known among all the nursing staff that the other hospital paid better. And there were people that would leave this hospital and go work at the other one because the money was better. Almost all of them came back because what was different was the culture in the hospital that we were working in. It was a culture that cared, where the leadership was down in and among the staff, asking them, how are you? How is your day going? What can I do to support you? Which the questions that we asked, yes, but then what came with it is that they provided the opportunity to continue to practice these skills of maintaining community and skills of maintaining resilience. And so the lesson that we learn here is that money isn't everything. And we all know that healthcare is not a profession you go into to become rich. But healthcare is a profession that people stay in because it's rewarding and it's satisfying. And if they feel like they are also being nurtured and fed by that career, where they love their work, where they love talking to patients, where they love coming in and having those conversations, where they stay to do that, go beyond that extra mile, that's what we want to cultivate. And that's how we get these sustainable outcomes. So we're talking about intelligent energy management. Okay, it sounds soft, right? And as we talk about resilience and self-care, I think in the past, people have said, yeah, that's great. Let's get to work and actually do the real work, right? They're not understanding that those soft skills of resilience, of performance, fulfillment, and health is actually energy management. So the more you support those characteristics and that training and provide an environment where that's happening on a regular basis for these people, you're building up your workforce and you're building up your resources. People want to stay. They want to come work there because they talk to each other. It's well known in the community what's happening in one facility or another facility. And so rather than choosing the lesser of two evils, people are going to gravitate to where they where they're hearing all this good stuff is going on. We've seen a lot of this in the States with Google. And they provide ping pong tables for their employees, and there's a cafeteria, and everybody gets to eat for free. Just things that on some level you would say, really, a ping pong table? But it wasn't just the ping pong table. It was them caring for the well-being of the staff enough to give them an opportunity to discharge energy that might have been depleting to them and build up the energy that's going to be renewing to them. And so this translates to turnover. This is one of the data points that we look at. So if you're looking at this graph, these are 5 health systems, 5 very large health systems in the United States. And I'm looking to my left just so I can see it a little bit bigger here. And these hospitals and health networks put this intervention into place and then track the cost of turnover because they were able to keep their people. And turnover dropped from 22 to 9% in the first example, 21 to 5%. Can you imagine 5% turnover? It's just unreal. 36% down to 5%. And so these are very real. And then what you have in the center is the cost savings, that light green. So the previous turnover percent is blue, in the blue. The turnover rate after the intervention is in orange. And the light green in the middle is the cost savings for the organization. And if you look over to the right, these numbers are in dollars. And then I did a little bit of math based on yesterday's exchange rate and translated that into euro. So $4 million savings because of a 4-week intervention that helps people feel valued, that gives them skills to be able to keep their energy reserves up, that helps them feel like they can bring more of themselves to work. It's amazing. And it's these soft skills that tend to be ignored, that people think don't matter. And what the data shows us is that it's compelling. Like, how can you not pay attention to this? Let's see some other ways that it shows up for us. So turnover rates. Now, these are 4 other organizations, data from 4 other organizations, and the savings that they had in their first year. So the savings are immediate, right? Are pretty immediate. They happen in the short term. Double-digit improvements as you went into this, as they went into the second year. Increased satisfaction from patients. So this was interesting because as the staff learned the skills, they became better care providers. They were able to bring more of themselves into work, and they were happier with their work. But then what they also did is that they translated that care to their patients. They taught their patients a lot of these skills. We just worked with, out of this course, 1 week into the course, one of the healthcare assistants that just went through our training came back and said that she had a patient that needed to go into, that she took in to go to surgery. And she used the skills that we taught her. She taught the patient. And the patient was able to reduce her anxiety level going into her surgery, and came out and said to her, "Thank you. I would never have been able to handle this so well if I hadn't used the skills that you just taught me." So it trickles down. Employee satisfaction goes up. If you have employee satisfaction, you're going to have employee loyalty. You're also going to have employees who talk about your organization to everybody they know. And that's going to help you become an employer of choice. Reduced healthcare costs is not such an issue for you, for your employees, I don't think. But what we're able to see, though, is the improved health of the care worker because of using these skills. So their anxiety goes down, their depression goes down, their anger and their stress go down. And these things are all able to be, they translate into absenteeism. So that went down. And then there were fewer medical claims and increased productivity. So one of the things that is important to note on this, again, from a leadership standpoint, is that everything revolves around data. Being able to measure changes in the change in the employee, in the change in the organization, in the costs, in turnover rates, things like turnover rates, and it comes out in your bottom line. You're really able to see how much effect you can have in the organization when you're actually increasing the productivity of your workforce, when you're improving their resilience so they're able to work better for a longer period of time without feeling like they are exhausted and burned out. And it comes through what people would call soft skills that don't matter. So if you change your approach, if you help change the culture of your organization where they have these skills and techniques, one of our nurses who's in, can I say names, in Dublin, a large hospital in Dublin. Well, Crumlin's a big place. But one of them told us that she took these skills and she started using it during handover, during her shift change, and teaching her colleagues these skills. And that they got to a point where they looked forward to doing it every day as they were beginning their work and as they were coming off their shift, because what it did is that it helped process what happened during the day. It helped build the team because now they were working on a common goal together, which is to be a better team, to feel better. And who doesn't want to feel better? But they were doing it in a supportive way at their workplace. So it becomes associated with where you are. And so if you feel good every day when you go somewhere, when you start going to that place, you automatically start feeling good. And if you want your organization, your care facility to be a place where people start feeling good when they get there, where they're looking forward to coming to work and what their day is going to be because they're in an environment that's very supportive, You're managing their stress. They're helping manage patient stress. You're going to be more effective. You're going to get a safer care environment because now your mistakes have gone down. People are functioning at a higher level. So on the personal level and on the organizational level. So the amount that somebody believes, Paul said, he said it very well when he says it's not how much stress there actually is, it's what the employee feels that the stress level is. So it's perceived stress, and the perceived stress of the employee is going to predict their health. It's going to predict how many days they're out of work. It's going to predict what they're engaging in outside of work that affects their ability to come to work. Okay, substance use. It improves the ratings of the work environment. So when someone goes out onto Indeed or into Glassdoor or LinkedIn or whatever social media that they're on and they're talking about their work environment, wouldn't you like to see them talking about the work environment in the context of how supportive it is and how they're able to be more efficient under stressful conditions, right? Because we're building their resilience. And so this is going to increase their retention. It's going to lower your cost. It will reduce errors. It'll improve patient care. And it will make you the employer of choice. It will make you the leader of choice. And not just you, because you're training your managers, right? And your supervisors. And those people all have the same skills. And so the effect is magnified. And the thing with these skills is that they don't take long to learn. They don't take long to implement. It's something that you can do with your eyes open in the moment while you're talking to it. I've been putting some of these skills into place while I've been talking. And I'm going to share one of them with you because I do want you to see how quickly it can make a change. And so just check in with yourself and how you feel. Now, some of you may have been here for a few hours, and somebody may just be coming in as you're listening to recordings from a busy day. And just check in with yourself for a second and notice how you feel. Karen asked earlier, what is your level of activation? So pay attention to where that is. And I'm going to teach you a heart-focused breathing technique, which is a tool for self-regulation. And we talk about resilience, self-care, and resilience. But on the resilience standpoint, we're talking about emotional refocusing and emotional regulation. And emotional refocusing is stopping the stress reaction in the moment. So you're walking into a scenario, walking into a room, or something happens around you, and you immediately start flipping into a reaction. Because one of the things that happens in the human brain is that you have default reaction patterns, right? So we all know somebody who is easily set off, right? They're triggered and they're going to go into a reaction, and you can always predict that they're going to be that way. We also know people who stay very calm in stressful situations. And we usually say, wow, I'd like to be more like that, right? But what we are seeing, what we are witnessing is a default brain pattern. So the brain has neural patterns that in how it reacts to stress. And the more you do something, so the more anxious you are, the more likely you are to be anxious, right? The more calm you are, the more likely you are to be calm. So what we're doing is we're retraining the brain to stop that reaction, which is the emotional refocusing. The emotional refocusing. And then as we learn more of the techniques, you train the brain how to stay in that mode so that you have a new default. And so the default, instead of being anxiety, reactivity, irritability, the new default now becomes calm, focused, alert, and in a better emotional space. And you can see a change in as little as 1 to 2 weeks. So heart-focused breathing is the first step in this. And it's very effective for self-regulation, stopping a stress response. It's the first step to getting into a coherent state. And when we're talking about a coherent state, what we're talking about is getting the heart and the brain to actually work together. And I didn't put it into the slide deck. I have a great graphic of a heart variability tracing that actually shows what the heart looks like when it's in a very high stress, emotional, anxious state and what it looks like when it's in a very calm and focused state. And we're not talking sleepy. That's the other differentiator that's very important, because we can't afford to be sleepy when we're at work. We need to be calm and alert and focused. And this is where this breathing technique begins. This is where it takes us to the beginning of it. And it's getting the heart and the brain in focus, working together so that you can maintain your composure in challenging situations. And so I'm going to walk you through this technique just very quickly, and you'll see that what the change you can make. So the first step is to focus your attention in the area of your heart. You don't have to touch it. Some people like to do that. If you do, that's fine. It's a reminder. The first time you might want to just tap though a little bit to help bring your attention to your heart. And that helps draw away distraction. So focus your attention in the area of your heart. And now imagine your breath flowing in and out from your heart. And slow your breathing down so that's a little slower and deeper than usual. Ideally, in and out to a count of 5, in to a count of 5, and out to a count of 5, if that's available to you. But find a rhythm that's easy and comfortable. And we're going to do this for just a minute. Now pay attention to how you feel. Did you feel that shift that happens when you intentionally slow down and intentionally stop a stress reaction? I don't know if we have a chat available, but we'd love to hear if you felt that in a few words in there. But this technique is something you can do when your eyes are open. It's something that can be done in a busy unit. It can be done in the moment. Remember, military, police, fire, EMS, the emergency medical services workers, they do this in the moment, and that's what helps them function well. The other thing this technique does as you practice it is that it helps you hear your own inner intuition better, because you're cutting down all the noise and you're not engaging that amygdala that's creating all that mental stress, that's creating that anxiety, that's making you hyper-reactive. All of those things happen up here in just one little part of your brain that as you keep practicing this technique, you can learn to actually manage so that your emotions are not running you and you are in control of the situation and how you're reacting to it. So from this calm and focused place, I want you to just reflect for a moment on what it is that you're building in your organization. We come into this profession to help individual people. As leaders, now we help people on a systemic level. The values that we bring in are what we translate into our nurse leadership, into all levels of leadership. Nurses are not. But if you are someone that wants to bring heart into your world, right? Most of us do. That's why we're in this profession. We're helpers. That's something that can actually translate to the way you do your work and into the way you run an organization, in a way you run large organizations. And stress, if we aren't paying attention to it, is going to affect performance. It's going to affect the relationships that your team members have with their leadership as well as with each other. And then it's going to affect patient care. And so if you have resilience training, self-care training, you are improving your outcomes, you're lowering your cost, you're motivating your teams to be better together. And it comes through emotional refocusing, emotional retraining, and self-care skills. And it doesn't take a long period of time. So people that go through this really, like I said, I shared that they're life changing, and it happens at all levels, right? We have healthcare assistants out in Cork who are helping their patients manage their procedures and their stressors. We have nursing students in Athlone who were truly thinking that they could not enter the nursing profession because it was so stressful and because the events of the past year were so traumatic. And after they learned these skills, even after 2 hours, they said, this is the first time in a year that I feel like I've been able to be calm. People understand that this is something that they can do as part of their life. And so it's something that they can work into their life, and how important it is to take care of themselves. And they recognize a training that we just finished in Limerick, a large one, that the employer provided this for them, that the employer cared enough for their well-being to bring this in. And their level of gratitude, not only for what they just learned, but the gratitude extends to the employer by extension, by association. And you can bet that the level of loyalty for those employers has gone way up, and that workforce is happier working together. And so when we start bringing this into this model of leadership, where now these steps can take on a different meaning because it can all be part of it. So when you're attracting your staff and the people that you're bringing into your organization, this is something that's going to differentiate you. It's something that's going to raise their motivation, and they will talk to each other. They will talk to their friends and bring them in, and you become the employer of choice, regardless of, or I should say, even if you have a difficult working situation, right? High levels of stress, maybe a physical location that might be difficult to get people to come to. If they feel like they're going into a workplace that is supporting them and that is looking out for their own well-being, they will come and they will stay. And you begin that engagement from the first moment that you contact them, because from the first time you're contacting them, you're giving them message that we care enough to make sure that you're going to be okay when you're working for us. And we know that if we take care of you, you're going to take care of our patients. And you set that expectation, and you're able to build that into your culture, into your values, and bring that in during your onboarding. So it becomes part of your brand promise. The organization that I work for now, when I'm doing my clinical work and seeing patients, their brand promise is know me, care for me, and ease my way. This is what we promise our patients. And we are able to do that. And I'm able to take these skills every minute and apply that so that I can be there for patients and deliver this brand promise, because I'm able to take care of myself in a way that lets me do my job better. So as leaders and managers, think back to those traits that we put up at the beginning, and how they, as a team, you need those traits everywhere. And so as you're continuing to build the self-care and the resilience practices, as you're developing your leaders so that they are developing each other, now you're really building a team that is going to be tight and that's going to be cohesive. And as leaders, if you are able to give the example of practicing taking care of yourself, of now I've had people come back and say, people are asking me, what happened to you? You're such a different person now that you're not so stressed. You're not abrasive anymore. Now you actually care about the team, and we can tell. These are the things that we're hearing. And so it can have that trickle effect that's going to just make you a better organization all around. And so just in summary of what we talked about today, we talked about key traits. What makes a leader, what makes a manager, what makes a good team, and how those attributes are interrelated and how they need to exist in all of us so that no matter what part of the organization you're needing to move into, if you need to step into leadership for a day or for a month or permanently, those traits are important to be able to support. How stress is going to impact your ability to perform, how it's going to impact your resilience over time, and how it's going to impact your staff, your leaders, your patients, the impact on the organization. And we talked about the bottom line with real data and real details about when you care for your staff, when you teach them these skills, what it does for your organization, and how those outcomes are sustainable. And hopefully this will give you a chance to reflect on what your leadership is looking like and what it is that you are building. And I want to leave you with a final encouragement from leaders who have gone through these programs and what they are feeling when they go through, and their encouragement to other people of, don't lose heart. Developing resilience and the ability to self-manage is the secret to be the support for the patients, nurses, and performing at the level needed by our organizations. These directors who are seeing their people feeling more in control of the situation, not as reactive or overwhelmed. So our training, the employees who have taken this training have experienced a shift in perspective about what's going on around them and have developed a more positive, energized, and empowered outlook. And the one, I love this administrator who said, I just want to share this with everyone who feels burned out, overwhelmed, or stuck in their professional life. Imagine an organization, a world that leads with the heart. And that is my hope for you, that you're able to find this path to set this new default for yourself and your organization. And Paul, I hope I stayed with my time. Give us time for some questions.
It doesn't matter. Wow. I hope other people had the same experience I just had, which was quite a lot of eureka moments, in the sense of from the statistical side of things, from the reality side of things, from pretty much every different level. I think in this particular area, particularly with nurses who kind of, in a lot of cases, accidentally fall into those management roles, there's a lack of realization in a lot of cases for a lot of things. Also, I don't know about in the States, but obviously in Ireland, yes, finances are important, budgets are important, but the nurses that end up in a lot of these management roles sometimes don't even get to view them, so they're not aware of them. Sometimes they're heavily involved in them without wanting to be involved in them at all. And also makes it very difficult for them to work in both worlds, in a caring world where they feel money shouldn't be an issue about anything, but also understanding that, well, if I don't, the business isn't here, and then how do I care at all? So it's a yes, I had, and I'm not a nurse manager, and I was having tons of eureka moments, almost on behalf of nurse managers I know. So it was but yeah, there's actually a couple of one of the questions, couple of kind of questions that obviously show the struggle. Someone is struggling to be a leader and a manager at the same time and feel that those two roles put me in conflict. Any advice?
Yeah, and that comes with the, I think sometimes where that comes into conflict is when we have a preconceived notion that leadership has to look a certain way or management should look a certain way. Because remember, if we go back to those attributes, it's being able to communicate a vision of this is what needs to happen. But the beauty of having the nursing background is the creativity. Nurses are amazing, creative people and they can come up with the most innovative solutions and not even realize the depth of the innovation because we're used to coming at it from that nursing brain. And I think where the conflict also starts to come in is that this is not business enough, that there's a different expectation. And because we haven't had as many examples of what it is to bring heart into this and how to bring in your own personal values in, yes, this needs to be done a certain way, and helping that other person understand why And when you're working in a unit or you're busy or there's a lot going on, it's hard to stop and communicate the why, which is why you need to talk about the why all the time, so that all you need to do is remind somebody of why you're bringing a certain point up. And so, for example, if we're, somebody needs to, if you have a patient, we had someone the other day who needed an urgent referral that went outside of the normal system, right? And so the call that we made is, you know what, we're going to pick up the phone, make a direct call, get this patient in there, get it taken care of. And then someone said, well, but that's not the normal way we do things. Right. And then, okay, but let's go back to the brand promise of easing the patient's way. And this is a scenario where easing that patient's way and taking care of the patient needs to take precedence over the process, which is necessary for standardization. And we want to do it as often as we can, but we also understand that you need to see that patient as a human, or that person as a human first, and bring that heart piece into it. That the heart is way more intuitive and can problem solve much better than our brain can. And so when we've got the ability to be able to tap into that quickly and tap into that intuition, you're finding that you're able to bring all those things together.
Wow. And then I think it's kind of like the same answer, but I just want to read out the question because it's a question, but also because I think it relates. A lot of people will be thinking the same way. I recently got promoted into a management role and I've just realized I have no idea what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
And basically the same idea, looking for advice. So to
panic.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had the same experience. I actually convinced an employer that they needed to make me vice president because I was sure that I was going to be able to save the organization, and the position had been listed as a director position. And I spoke with them, I'm like, no, this needs to be a vice president position because it's going to be this important and make all these changes. And I got into it and got in around a bunch of business people and realized I had no idea what I was doing. And so the first thing is to stop and take a deep breath, right? Because when you are in the, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm doing mode, you're tripped into that fight or flight response. And when you are tripped into that fight or flight response, you're secreting, I'm going to get technical for a minute, you're secreting cortisol, which is the stress hormone that lets you run away from the tiger or fight the bear or whatever that is. But what cortisol also does is that it shuts down your thinking brain. Cortisol, when you're in that stressed response, you literally cannot think. It's much more difficult to think. And that's because your body is saving all its energy for the fight and for getting you to safety. And so when you have the skills to take that breath and stop that response, now you're letting the rest of your higher brain flow, and allowing that knowledge that you actually have to come forward. You got promoted for a reason. And somebody recognized your ability to be able to handle a situation, be a leader, and get into that. So what you need to do is give yourself a chance to absorb the information, because you have enough training and background to be able to work on your feet and to look at the situation around you, quickly assess what's going on, and then make a plan of action based on what you see around you. And being able to have a little bit of coaching, finding that mentor, finding that leader. I do work with a lot of people who are newly promoted into these positions, teaching them the skills to be able to stay calm, but then also teaching them, like, these are the basics of what you really need to know and learn and understand that you're not expected to know everything all at once. And it's okay to say, let me do a little research and get back to you on that. Perfectly okay to say that.
Mm-hmm.
And as a new person, you'll find your resources.
I think from my experience with nurse managers, I believe a lot of them don't realize that they have the transferable skills. They just need to apply them to a different situation. And for some reason, they think it's a different skill that's required. But it's right. Like you had mentioned, when you think about the environments that a nurse would have been in their previous experience as a nurse, and what they've had to deal with, and how quick they had to think, and how quick they had to react, and really think with the heart and the brain all at the same time. A lot of the skills, they just don't realize that they're the same skills. They just need to
Right.
apply them to business, which kind of leads very nicely into the next question, which is what unique traits do you feel nurse leaders bring into the business world?
Yeah. I think my favorite, I won't say complaints. Nurses are humble. They're amazing. And they will come in, and what they will usually say is, I can't do this. I'm just a nurse. Right? Just a nurse. And there's a fantastic poem that we'll have to bring forth on this. But just a nurse has learned in your nurse training, you have learned how to literally be in life or death situations and hold your composure enough to help that person, to know we need to do steps A, B, C, and D when anybody else around you would be on the floor, passed out, frozen, whatever it is. But nurses have the ability to be in those high pressure situations and think it through in a second. You have the ability to see the large picture and to basically slow time down so that you can come up with a plan and mobilize the people around you to get that plan done. You have the ability to identify somebody who thinks that maybe they don't know how to do something and say, oh, yes, you can. I have faith in you. You're going to get it done. And you're going to get it done now because I need you to do that. And people rise to the occasion because we know how to bring the best out in people. And I mean, that's just the beginning. I could go on for a really long time.
And it's funny that when you describe the slow things down and react in that way, it's like describing a Marvel character, so some superhero magic skill that you're right, but obviously if you're put in a situation so many times, it just starts to become natural. And for what's not natural for 99% of the population, is a natural skill for them. It's funny as well, you mentioned the humble side of things. So obviously working with nurses in the sense of jobs and finding jobs, we always struggle with the aspect of getting them to sell themselves.
Right. Recognizing their value.
Yeah, a personal profile section of a CV where I'm explaining that this is where they have the opportunity to talk about how great they are, usually comes back not even with a sentence. Like half a sentence. I love nursing is kind of a very common one, and their ability to sell themselves like most other professions would on a CV. It's so strange.
Not taught.
They just struggle with it. They genuinely. There's the humble aspect, but they just don't have the ability to put it out there. Even on top of the fact that now I've told you not to be humble, they still can't do it. And I really have to coach a lot in regards to that side of things. Now, this is a question from me, okay, from me personally. So self-care and resilience, and you talked about resilience, and okay, I'm going to be stupid, hopefully for the benefit of others. Okay. So in relation to self-care and resilience, like what's the difference? Are they different? Are they the same thing?
Excellent question, because they tend to get wrapped up in the same label. And self-care provides the environment for the resilience to take place. So resilience is, I think back again, it's the ability to prepare for, adapt, and make change, okay, in the face of that challenge. So the resilience is what gives you the ability to have that reaction and to do that performance. Self-care builds the reservoir, right? You gotta fill up that inner battery so that you've got the energy to put back out. And you do that with the self-care. So self-care is part of resilience building. And there are other pieces that go into that. Proper diet, getting enough sleep, making sure that you're surrounding yourself with people who are going to be supportive of you, contemporaries, supplements, medication, all those things that we do to take care of ourselves is, we have a whole 4-week program that we do just on how to it's amazing how much healthcare workers also don't really know how to take care of themselves. They can take care of everybody else, but they're not feeding their own bodies and feeding their own souls. And so if you're getting enough sleep, if you're eating a proper diet, if you're making that plan for how it is that you actually relax relax yourself, because you've got to be able to come down. You have to be able to relax and take a deep breath. You got to breathe out so that you can breathe in, right? Can't just do one or the other all the time. And then the resilience basically is what you're able to do because you've built up that energy capacity. You're able to refocus your emotions when you're under stress, and you're able to set a new default, set a new normal, a new baseline, where you are that calm, chill person that is a calm, cool, collected professional. And that's who you are. Not something you have to do, it's something that you become. And so those pieces are all part of that bigger puzzle.
Okay. This next question, I think, kind of relates very much to the problem, as in basically they're feeling that what we've been talking about today, I guess, in all the talks, basically, I guess they have an element of fear that, you know, they want their staff to basically, I guess what they're trying to say is they want them to be able to take a beating, and that make them stronger, that makes them tougher, and that what we're talking about today is an element of babying or making them soft.
Right.
So, you know, and me personally, my opinion is this is technically part of the problem, taking someone who wants to be in care, meaning they do have that element in it, and then you're almost beating that out of them at the same time.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So self-care and resilience have 4 domains, right? There's the emotional, the intellectual, the physical, and the spiritual. Okay. There's 4 pieces of that. And you need to be able to, you have to build those up so that you've got basically the strength to take the beating. So for example, let's use an easy example of somebody who wants to get strong. And so they start going to the gym, right? You go to the gym every day in order to get strong, so that when you are faced with needing to lift a car off of somebody at the scene of an accident, right? You're strong enough, you're able to do that because you've been going to the gym every day for the last 4 months. Okay, so you need to be able to take a beating, but the way that you are able to take a beating is by building somebody else up so that they're able to take the beating. Right. So that is that is why this is used in the, like, think about the military using this, right?
Yes.
The elite forces, right? They're teaching them how to be able to breathe in this way so that they, when it's time to perform, they've got what it takes. So you don't build somebody up by continuously beating them. That's for the part that you see. You build somebody up by building them up, right? You got to feed a body in order to keep it alive. You have to eat well before you can run a marathon. There's a balance. There's a yin and the yang. And so there are plenty of people around to beat you up. You got to be the one that helps take the steps to build the person up for the staff, because they're taking beating every day that they come to work. And they're having to deal with those stressors. Even on a good day, the level of stress that they are under remains elevated. When somebody is angry, 5 minutes of anger or 5 minutes of stress from an argument or an altercation or anything like that, the cortisol level in the body, the stress hormones in the body, remain elevated for 6 hours after a 5-minute argument. The body stays at this high level of being in the stress mode for a long period of time. And so you need to be able to help the body come down to a level where it's not putting such a stressor on the heart, such a stressor on, you know, just everything else, your immune system, diabetes, heart blood. That's where all this stuff comes from. It comes from elevated stress over a prolonged period of time. But each time you're under that level of stress, people don't understand that the body stays that high unless you consciously figure out how to bring it down.
Yeah, you'd automatically assume argument over, stress level go.
Yeah. We have, there's a great study that was done here that showed a man having an argument with his wife, and he happened to be on a Holter monitor at the time and tracing the heart variability. So they were actually able to time exactly when the argument occurred, when the argument was over, and how long it took his heart to come back down to baseline normal level. And it took 8 hours. Wow. So he thought the argument was over, but his heart did not know the difference.
Oh yeah, so meant physically he was still in the argument for 8 more hours.
Yeah. And the more you think about it and ruminate and what if or I should have, all you're doing is compounding that.
No,
And
it's funny.
so that's, yeah.
In relation to the softness, I just watched a video recently where a guy was asked, a Navy SEAL was asked in Navy SEAL training, who makes it out the other side, and he was basically saying he can't tell you what they don't have, but he can tell you what everyone who makes it through the other side does have. And he said, we've got skinny guys, we've got weak guys, we've got strong guys that make it through the training. So I can't tell you, do they need muscle? Do they need this? Do they need that? No. And he was saying the ones who make it out of the training always have one thing in common. And that's they care enough about the guy on their left and the guy on their right that they're always going to step in to help that person. And because of that, the guy on the left and the guy on the right are also going to step in to help them, which is how they make it through the training. So it's amazing how when you think about the Navy SEALs, the word he used for how the one common denominator that he used for how people get through the training was care.
Yeah.
Which wouldn't have been the first word that came into my mind when I was thinking of Navy SEALs. So yeah, now in regards to because I would say for the Irish market, the heart focused breathing side of things would have been a new thing for a lot of people who are listening. So how does something like the heart focused breathing actually connect to the healthcare outcomes that we see?
So when you're doing the heart focused breathing and the techniques that go with it, you're slowing the heart down. You're connecting it to the brain so that they're working together. If you can imagine actually a rowing team, right? You've got 8 guys in the boat and everyone's rowing together, right? They are rowing together in coherence because they're all working together. Imagine what would happen if everybody's off doing his own thing, and right, that would be a disaster. So a similar thing is happening in the body. So when you are in coherence between your heart and your brain, the brain is functioning better. It's able to think more clearly. That's going to reduce your medication errors. It's able to boost the immune system, so the immune system functions more efficiently, which is going to reduce absenteeism in your days out. It helps lower anxiety and stress level. And so that's going to impact what somebody goes out and does after work that may or may not be so healthful as their stress management. But it's going to reduce anxiety and depression. And how much productivity is impacted by that. So it's the downstream effect of first being able to take care of yourself. You've got to have a solid foundation. You got to have 4 solid wheels on that car. And if you've got a tire that's low, the car is not going to be efficient, right? It's going to burn more gas. It's going to waste more energy. So if a body is not working coherently, you're wasting and depleting energy that would otherwise be used to function better, smarter, faster.
Like I've mentioned a few times on the talks today, that I suffer from anxiety and panic attacks, and it's amazing how illogical my brain becomes based on symptoms my body is feeling. So, and then the ability to almost like you had mentioned, and we did it actually with you, the ability to then do things like control the heart rate, control the breathing, body posture, control a lot of different things, all of a sudden fools my brain, kind of. So unfools, let's use that word. It sounds better. It sounds better. I unfools my brain. So all of a sudden my brain starts going, oh, there's something wrong. And then I'm able to, then it starts to work logically again. But in the middle of a panic attack, it just goes 100% illogical. And it doesn't matter.
And with practice. Yeah, I've had patients that I work with in the context of doing like a virtual visit where I come on like this, and they come into the visit in a full-blown panic attack, and I can get them calm in 5 minutes. And I can get them calm like you and I are talking. Now, there's still some anxiety running, but the panic hasn't taken it. Yeah. And what happens is that as you do it over time, is that you're laying new pathways in the brain so that the panic is no longer the default, where the anxiety is no longer the default. And they are able to then maintain control of the situation, because a lot of anxiety and panic is rooted in feeling out of control.
Yeah.
You don't have control over the situation. But once you get control over this situation, then you can stay calm in any scenario.
Interesting question, which I think I know the answer to, and I think this. This will be the last question. Does this work online?
Yes,
I
it
knew the
does.
answer, but I
And not only does it work online, it works in groups, and it's very powerful. It's powerful in line, and it's powerful in groups. So one at a time, or because when you have, especially if you have a work group together, then, or a group of colleagues, people, the community is so important. Of knowing that you're not alone, you're not the only one doing this. That is the power that we've been able to harness in Anam Korja, is bringing people together who say, I thought I was the only one, and now I know that I'm not. But even when we do that heart focused breathing practice together, or do an extended version of it, which we've been doing weekly, and whoever's able to come shows up, and we work together, and we apply it to everyday life situations. And then I hear back later and say, just being in that session changed my whole day.
Yeah.
It changed the afternoon and how I was able to go on to my next task. It's fabulous. It's really effective.
Perfect. Listen, thank you so much.